Scarefest Radio is sponsored by Blue Leaf Naturals, CBD and hemp oil products. Created with care from seed to shelf. BlueLeafNaturals.com. Spirit Mechanics, for your spiritual health and well-being. Find them on Facebook. MECHANIX. And by Coyote Chris Sutton, bringing light to the darkest places. CoyoteChris.com.
Opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scarefest Radio. The original broadcast date is March 15th, 2019. Tonight, everybody, we're talking European serial killers with Bud Jenness and my co-host, Coyote Chris Sutton. Few announcements, get a little business out of the way, as they say. Next week we will be at Lexington Comic and Toy Convention in Lexington, Kentucky. We'll probably do a Facebook Live. I'm not going to guarantee we're going to try to do any type of show from the con. We'll try to get some interviews, get some stuff done. But so next week, I don't know what Scarefest Radio will be bringing. Middle of March, end of March is the deadline for getting your speaker application in at thescarefest.com. If you want to speak this September at Scarefest XII, you need to be getting your speaker application in. Vendors, we posted the online vendor app. We've got the floor plan up, and if you go there and look, you'll see there's not as much space this year. So we're going to be tight on vendor space. If you're contemplating vending at the Scarefest, do go ahead and get your booth reserved so that you know you have your spot. That part of the con might be ugly this year, is people complaining that I've had a booth for 9 years, and get your application in. And of course we probably have like 10 viewers tonight because the University of Kentucky plays basketball tonight, and so God knows if anybody's even out there in Facebook and Twitter land viewing. We've actually got people in the chat room. The producer says we have people in the chat room, so not everybody gives a rat's ass about sports, obviously. One more thing I want to explain to everybody that follows me on Facebook and Twitter and watches. Okay. At one point this week, there was this test video that went out live to Periscope, Facebook, and Doccast. Basically, our streaming solutions provider has this new thing called, where you can do it from your cell phone. In other words, I can go out to everybody like I do on Friday nights, but I can do it from my cell phone without having to have a laptop. Great idea, except when you load it on your phone, it goes the hell live. The little go live button doesn't mean a damn thing. So you got to see me, and I just wanted to see if it loaded on a phone, and come to find out it not only loads, it broadcasts me in all my work clothing glory, crappy hair and all. So that was fun. So I've been deleting video copies of me sitting there staring at my phone at a very unflattering angle. I've been deleting that all week. I was at my desk. Okay, I was at my desk, but it's the same angle. It's actually the same angle. So you wouldn't have known. Now, I warned the gentleman ahead of time. Yes, we are talking European serial killers tonight. We're going to get to that here in just a few minutes. But the world has just lost its fucking mind. The big story, the big news story this week, and this shows how naive I am, Chris. The big news story this week, all over Facebook and on the news especially, on all the broadcast news, has been that a couple of Hollywood people and a bunch of rich dudes bribed somebody to get their kids into the really good colleges. Now, this is how naive I am. I always assumed that when you wanted to get your kid into Yale, you made a $500,000 donation to the library. You sponsored a banner at the arena. I assumed it was all above board and tax deductible to bribe your way into college. So apparently, I was so naive that I did not realize. That, is anybody? Are you gentlemen? Have you seen or are you going to see Captain Marvel?
I have already.
Yeah, I have
but
too.
I do a review blog. budsreviews.blogspot.com. No punctuation, no capital letters. I've not reviewed it on there yet because I came out feeling somewhat ambivalent. My wife keeps saying, for 11 years now, we've had all these other heroes, and now all of a sudden she's coming in and she's going to save the day. Who the crap is she? And I can understand that because she's always been a subordinate character in Marvel's lineup. So, that's the biggest beef I have with the way they've wormed her into I don't dislike Brie Larson. I don't hold anything against her because of the things she said in public. She's young. She was excited. I don't care. That's her. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, even if they're wrong. I'm not saying she's wrong, but
okay, no spoilers mainly because I haven't seen the damn movie, although I've read it some other.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about world politics.
But
and she some people.
Okay, but now the movie though. Now you're saying she's going to come in and save the day. Isn't that
based? That's what the producers have been saying since the first part of.
Right. Okay. Now maybe, but now if you review Captain Marvel, the movie, based on what she's going to do in the next Marvel movie,
who knows?
I'm just saying, is that a fair review?
Well, the movie is about her origin, so yeah, I think it'd be a fair review. My reviews are just what I liked, what I didn't like, because I get sick of people saying that movie sucked, that movie was stupid, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
So if I like something, I'll tell you why I like it. If I don't like something, I'll tell you why I don't like it. And sometimes I come out and I'm just like, I don't know how I feel. I do not know how I feel about this movie. I might make some people mad, but when I came out of Black Panther, I was like, why is everybody so excited? And then, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think the second coming had happened.
No, yeah.
And yet,
I agree with you on Black Panther. Black Panther was a decent superhero movie. It didn't blow me away.
For Best Picture. I mean, why was that one nominated for Best Picture when Infinity War should have been? If they were they need another category, but they have Hugos and other things.
Oh well.
They give.
Okay, I've managed to get up. We're going to go ahead and take our first commercial break, everybody. This has been a Scarefest Radio's first segment.
Ooh.
Have you checked out the Mama Ruby's family of metaphysical and spiritual shows? The Mystical Fair in Lexington, Kentucky, Lexington's only monthly psychic and holistic healing arts fair. The Inner Light Festivals in Louisville in June and Lexington in November. And watch for Mama Ruby's Expo coming in 2020. Plus, Mama Ruby's Meta Lecture Series featuring interesting guests speaking on fascinating subjects. Start your journey now at mamarubies.com for more information. Okay, everybody, we're back on the rails now. We're back on the rails now with Scarefest Radio. We are talking European serial killers. That's the way everything has gone for me this week. But now here's what I'm going to go ahead and throw out there, and then we're going to discuss it amongst ourselves. My thesis is, upon my brief research of European serial killers, are that American serial killers, although very, very good with sheer numbers, in other words, we do okay on getting the body count up, but the imagination, the sick, perverted stuff that has come out of Europe, we cannot hold a candle to. We are just totally outplayed. We are totally outplayed. It's like watching UK play some high school team somewhere. That's the way it comes out.
But they've had hundreds of years to master this art, though. You got to remember.
And it shows.
That's right.
It shows. That is, you are absolutely correct.
That's an important point because, in my encounters with the folks at Scarefest that have worked on shows like Ghost Hunters International, I've literally said to them, and I consider them friends. Upon first meeting, I've said, let me ask you a question. Why are you speaking in American slang that belongs to the 20th and 21st century to spirits that speak a foreign tongue and they lived there hundreds and hundreds of years ago? What makes you think they're going to understand you? Do you have a universal translator that you're using? Because this makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the EVPs that they say come up are in the foreign tongue, but they go in and say, is anyone here? Do you want to talk? I'm here for you. And I'm just like, please, let's find a different approach.
Well, I'll just say that there is a school of thought that says that they're reading your mind anyway. So it really doesn't matter as long as you think the question that they can glean the context of what you're saying from your thoughts. Just going to throw that out there. So okay. Go ahead, Chris.
But yeah, I've done that with native spirits here in the United States, and I have heard answers in English and I've heard answers in their tongue, even though I'm speaking. I mean, I know a few words of Sioux, so I'll throw that out there just to say, hey, But it just seems like they can understand what you're trying to say to them. That's just my experience. I mean, I don't know what Rob and Dustin, those guys, how that went for them. But yeah, I agree. That's a real interesting way of looking at it because you go to Vlad's castle and start speaking 21st century English. That's he wouldn't think he'd understand if he was actually there. It's a good point.
He's a good starting point because, in our conversation, I hope we'll avoid certain ones that have been overplayed. Mm-hmm. Jack the Ripper has been done to death, and everybody's familiar with that. But Vlad is one, since Florescu wrote In Search of Dracula back in the 70s, everybody knows something about Vlad the Impaler and, Vlad the son of the dragon. And, nobody considers that Bram Stoker had syphilis and he went over to Europe, and that's probably where he got it. When he came back, he was hallucinating and went to the doctors, and they told him, you got something wrong with your blood and it's going to drive you mad. And what is the story of Dracula about? It's about blood and it drives you mad, and it's all an allegory. But he did hear some about Vlad the Impaler, who ate
quick interjection though.
Like corpses, supposedly.
I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, but quick interjection. Okay, if we want to throw Vlad, I don't know if I want to throw Vlad the Impaler in on serial killers, because to me, he was government sanctioned, even though it was his own government. I mean, it was his own government.
Some of them I wanted to just knock out.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want these stereotypes.
The only one that I would let slide is probably Elizabeth Bathory, because she did her own thing and it wasn't sanctioned by her government. And she's a different story altogether.
Yeah.
But we can get there whenever.
Yeah. Besides, Vlad was more of a mass murderer anyway. He kind of falls outside of the serial killer definition. So,
well, that'd be like lumping Hitler in there, and not that it was, but that's a different.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
But,
so,
go ahead.
No, I was just, when you study serial killers, we talk a lot about the horror and movies and things like that. This is the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And
this
and
is
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I've been trying to come up with a comparative analysis of American serial killers and European serial killers. It seems to me that if you look at the broad spectrum of American serial killers, by and large, there's something in them, some innate process in which they want to get caught. Mm-hmm. They want to leave clues. They want, like Jack the Ripper wrote the letters to the police and, sent them body parts, organs and wrote things on the wall, and nobody to this day knows what it was. I went on a Jack the Ripper tour with Donald Rumbelow, who wrote the Jack the Ripper casebook. And he said that the reason they couldn't catch Jack the Ripper had nothing to do with royalty or anything of the sort. It was that there was a wall in London at the time. Jack the Ripper went in and murdered people within a certain boundary, and then he crossed the police jurisdiction and killed them on the other side, and he'd flip-flop over the wall. And then the police were fighting over who was going to solve the case and become famous. So that mindset was there. And I noticed that H.H. Holmes started his murders in America in Chicago 2 years before Jack the Ripper. But, Holmes, he didn't want to get caught. And he had sort of the British mindset. Jack the Ripper did, and he's probably one of the only ones of the European batch that wanted to get caught. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there was something driving him to taunt and tease the officials. But by and large, the serial killers in Europe, and the reason their body counts were so high was because they would catch their victims unawares and then, make themselves as innocuous as possible. There are recurring themes which we can get to shortly. But these are odd people. Among the listeners, is anybody curious about who the guy in the picture is that they put behind me? Anybody?
Yeah.
That fellow's name is Joachim Kroll, and he was a number. He was a number.
he's the one I mentioned before the show.
Yeah. He was a German serial killer, and he started in 1933. He was captured in 1991 by accident. He would catch little children. He would molest them, and then he would cannibalize their corpses and do other things. He had a rubber doll that he enjoyed, but we won't get into that. He had a long list of victims that he captured. And here's some of the ages of the victims: 19, 12, 24, 16, 13, 12, 25, 5, 61, 13, 10, and 2. Most of them he raped, but he got caught because they were looking for that little 4-year-old. This story reminds me of Albert Fish, who was an American serial killer, one of the first totally insane. Called himself the Antichrist, and stuck these pins about yay long up into his scrotum, and would flagellate himself and beat himself. And he had over a 300 victim count that they couldn't connect him to directly, but he confessed to when he was in prison. But they caught Kroll because he was cooking the little girl's body on the stove, and it was simmering on the stove, and they found a hand in a cooking pot and entrails that were stuck in the toilet pipes. That's a common thing that pops up again and again. When Europe became industrialized, for some reason, quite a few of these serial killers on into the 20th century even thought they could dispose of their victims' corpses by boiling the body, removing the meat and bone, and then taking the flesh, which they couldn't destroy, and flushing it down the toilet. And of course, like the 50-pound blob of baby wipes in London this past winter, it clogged up the toilet, and people started to smell it, and they went out, and that's how we got busted.
Yeah.
You look at the pictures, if you Google him and look him up, his pictures, woo, Lord, he's just this side of Ed Gein.
Yeah. Go ahead. What's different about him? Okay, usually a serial killer has a certain victim style. Usually, like Bundy. Look at Bundy; they were young women. Usually, they fall into a certain age group and a certain sex. And Gacy, John Wayne Gacy, the same. Usually around the same age, same young boys, or teenage boys. That's what would make him hard to catch, because he's all over the damn place. You have males, females, 4 to 20 something. I mean, way outside the usual spectrum for a specific one serial killer.
Well, his story is very, very much a bookend to a case in which this fellow, I always forget his name. There was a movie about him in the 90s with Donald Sutherland. It was called Citizen X. And he was this serial killer would catch young girls at the train station. He'd make sure nobody was looking, and while they were waiting for their train, he'd grab them, take them out in the woods and kill them, and then he'd cannibalize the corpses. And when he was ultimately caught, he was so insane that they put him in a cage in the courthouse. So his trial was held with him sitting in a cage. And they acted out very well in the film. The film's very faithful to the true story. But I read a book about that, and he was all over the place too. He would kind of perambulate around all the train stations, and but he had a type that he was always looking for. Defenseless kids usually, and something I wanted to bring up is that if you ever read Robert, getting John Bonet's dad mixed up with this,
the FBI agent.
Yeah,
those who fight monsters.
I have lived, and those who fight monsters, and I've lived in the monster. I have lived in the monster, which I highly recommend. He explains how you can read a crime scene and figure out which type of serial killer committed the act, because there are two kinds: one that's simmer and plotted out, and they're cool and calculated, and they try not to leave much evidence. But then there's the passion murderer. And, in Europe, there's a long list of people who claim to be werewolves and vampires and this sort of thing. And the townspeople would catch them cannibalizing their victims. So cannibalism is a big deal. And I don't know if the removal of the flesh was post-World War II, but that's what fascinated Ed Gein. And he would strip the cadavers out of the graveyard, their flesh literally, and make ornamental garments out of it. Belts and window shades and a flesh suit of a woman, and go around walking on his farm at night in the moonlight, dressed like, he's where they got the idea for Leatherface and Norman Bates and, quite a few of the serial killers that were popularized in America.
Yeah. Or like James Gunn's character in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, well, that's exactly where they got the idea, because the Gein house in Wisconsin, the Plainfield house, Wisconsin, was it Wisconsin or Illinois? It was up there, up north. The entire house was it looked like a hoarder house, except he was eating food out of human skulls that he had sawed down. He was caught because this cashier reminded him of his mama, and he conked her in the head, stole the cash register so it would look like a robbery, because he was not smart. And when he was caught, because they were looking for this lady, he had gutted her like a deer, and she was hanging from the rafters of his barn, and he was getting ready to, prepare the body. But his house was a total wreck. Rats and newspapers and Life magazine went in there and took photographs, and I've got those printed out from before Silence of the Lambs came out. I noticed the case and said, that's like Norman Bates. But the mother's room was pristine. Mm-hmm. And, he was inspired by the European serial killers to make the skin lampshades. And mm-hmm. He tried to order them through the mail, and it was illegal. Somebody should have.
All right, I hadn't heard that one before.
That's,
yeah.
These guys are off the wall. And you know what's funny is that most of these guys, these serial killers, and constitutionally are not insane when they're mostly. But we can talk about that more here in a little bit But I'm going to turn it over to Wes right now.
Okay.
Oh, we're just going to let that last comment fly past. Yes, Sears and Roebuck, everybody. That used to have everything. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When I come back, I'm going to throw one last little note in for those of you who are fans of Kroll, Joachim Kroll. Everybody, you're watching Scarefest Radio. Everyone is talking about CBD oil. Most of us know that CBD is a cannabis compound that has significant medical benefits, but does not make people high. Its benefits include pain relief, anti-seizure properties, anxiety relief, fights cancer, reduces the risk of diabetes, and it is even used as a sleep aid. Blue Leaf Naturals CBD and hemp products are full-spectrum hemp extract oils. They use only hemp grown in Kentucky, supporting Kentucky farmers and businesses and helping you and your family stay healthy and well. Blue Leaf Naturals, created with care from seed to shelf. Visit their website at blueleafnaturals.com. Blue Leaf Naturals, a Kentucky proud company. And welcome back to Scarefest Radio and our fun-filled, frivolous conversation about European serial killers. Okay, now I'm going to interject here. This is my observations as a non-serial killer. I'm more of a spree kind of guy.
So you say.
You made mention about how Kroll liked his victims young. Well, it's obvious. This guy was a committed cannibal because in his trial, at his trial, he admitted to murdering 14 people. And as to why he practiced cannibalism, he said matter-of-factly that eating human flesh cut down on his monthly grocery bill. Can't we all relate to that?
That's right. Pragmatism at its best.
So I really, Bud, I'll admit it. I thought you were going off the rails when you said that our serial killers got their inspiration from their serial killers. But when you said that they were trying to order human flesh lampshades, okay, if that's the case, then maybe there's something to that. Let's see. I think you mentioned it. As far as we know, who tops the list with the body count over there?
Okay, let's see.
I think it's the one that killed all the people in the nursing home not that long ago. I think he's credited with having the big numbers.
Yeah, and there's a great documentary about him on Netflix. But now, do you mean by themselves or with accomplices? Because with the accomplices, some of them had.
I think to keep the conversation simple, we won't go into team stats.
Okay.
There.
Sadly, I have to come back across the pond because the highest body count would be for H.H. Holmes, who killed 230 people.
Yeah, but see that's once again that's the American. See that's American, and once again we kill in big numbers. I get that, but we're concentrating on Europe tonight. I know that Peter Zelenka, that was the one that killed all the people in the nursing home. How many was he alleged to have killed? If that's what I'm thinking about.
What was his name again?
No, maybe that's not the one I'm thinking about because he only killed like 7 people.
He's called Dr.
Dr. Death.
They called him Dr. Death.
Harold Shipman.
Yeah.
He was convicted for 15 murders, but they think possibly 215 to 475.
Well,
in the UK.
When you see the modus operandi of these guys, it's often echoed here in America. And there was a guy by the name of Jenness Nielsen, and he was from Germany, and he would frequent gay bars, pick up guys like Jeffrey Dahmer, get him back to his place, and kill them. I don't remember if Jeffrey Dahmer dressed up his corpses or not, but this guy slept with them. He had them in the bed for several days. And then after they started to stink, then he'd boil their dismembered bodies that he cut up in the bathtub and try to get rid of the flesh down the toilet. And he killed quite a few people. This is in the 70s. Here we go. Jenness Nielsen. He spent several years killing people. It says he was Scottish actually, but he spent time in Germany, and he was he was in the military. And most of his murders though took place in London. He trying to see the body count. Why are we interested in that?
Because numbers matter. Numbers matter.
Content.
Now, another one.
12 men and boys and 7 others that he confessed to. Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, wait a minute.
A book
that was misogynistic thing. 7 others? 12 men and boys and then 7 others.
Yeah.
You women are just others.
Well, the 12 were known. The 12 were known. The 7 he confessed to without identifying who they were.
Gotcha.
But he enjoyed laying in the bed with them, and he'd do things, and we won't get into that. But
let's get into it. Because the next one I want to talk about, before I toss it back over to Chris, Jurgen Barscht. Jurgen Barscht, I don't even know what his body count was. It doesn't even say here, I don't think. But here is, okay, everybody. This is why I say that we have to step up our game. Now I'm going. He would. Here's what he did. He kidnapped people, took them to an air raid shelter, beat them to a pulp, and then he tied them up, fondled their genitals, masturbate, strangle, or stab the victims to death. Now, here's the thing. The way this is worded, here's the exact quote. He would tie his victims up, fondle their genitals, masturbate, strangle, or stab the victims to death. Now, here is my question. That sentence leaves it hanging, pardon the expression. Did he do this, and then did he masturbate and then strangle, or did he masturbate them to death? I'm sorry, that's the way that is. My English teacher would have had a fit at that sentence, and this is on the internet.
Well, H.H. Holmes, when he would push his victims into the vault, and they're screaming to get out and losing oxygen, he would pleasure himself into a handkerchief. Because he got excited by the thought.
Well, that was back then, and people didn't have paper towels. I get that. But the way that sentence is structured is that's worse than the serial killer. But yeah, so this guy, and then after all that,
Kroll, sex doll. Remember, he had a sex doll that he would pleasure himself with when he killed his victims.
Who had a sex doll?
Kroll. He had an inflatable sex doll.
We're back on Kroll now. Oh God.
Yeah, but I just noticed that Jeffrey Dahmer, when he killed his first victim, he flushed him down the toilet too in America. So
American plumbing is a little more reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we.
Well, that's a sign of a rookie right there. I mean, he didn't think it through. The first crime was he hadn't quite got the hang of it yet. He's lucky he didn't get. Well, I mean, he should have been caught then, but he wasn't. After that, he thought it out and got, used the barrels and that kind of stuff after that.
Now, did I mention that the book about Jenness Nielsen is called Killing for Company? I read that probably 30 years ago. It's a really good book if you like that sort of thing. And one of my favorite authors about serial killers in general is Harold Schechter. And he teaches at Pratt Institute. And I was so impressed with the way that he wrote. He wrote a book about Ed Gein, Albert Fish, H.H. Holmes, and several others. I wrote him, and I said, you have an incredible ability to describe the most gruesome things in the world in a tasteful manner. And that impresses me. And he wrote me back, and I didn't pursue a correspondence, but I'm sure he's got enough people that write him. But he is a fantastic author. He's not written one in a while. This is a really good one if people are interested in worldwide serial killers. A to Z encyclopedia of serial killers, and it's got photographs. That's a really good book. But, you know, in America, what do you hear about a mass killer most of the time? He was a quiet man. He never bothered anybody. He always kept to himself. You know, this is the last person in the world I would have expected to do this. That's the same story in Europe. They're innocuous. They're in the background. They're quiet. They're soft-spoken. They don't bother anybody. Many times they appear to be very, very timid, but get them alone with their victim and they become a ravenous beast. Some of them swear that they were overtaken by, you know, this force that drove them against their will to do it. But of course, you got guys like Kroll who enjoyed it. He thought it was, you know, a good time called Joaquin. And
but are they good with children? Always understood that for Ed Gein.
Well, you know, his case reminds me so much of Albert Fish, though, because Albert Fish was obsessed with the Great Depression and the famine in China. And he told stories quite often about Asian folks baking and eating their children when there was no food, and dogs first and then children. And that's where he got the idea. And Grace Mudd, the little girl that caused him to be captured, because he wrote a letter to the family, a gruesome letter, why no one knows. And the stationery was the same as something else that he had written on. And the pictures of him, he looks like when Macaulay Culkin was presumably on crack back in the day. At one point, I put a picture up and said, why didn't they hire Macaulay to play Albert Fish in a movie at that time? Because he looked like an old, derelict man. Macaulay did. And Albert Fish was just... They always said, well, he looks like somebody's grandpa. These European serial killers, they look like anybody. You know, Kroll, though, his eyes are freaky. Ed Gein's eyes freak me out, though. There's a certain angle where he's looking off and his eyes look like they have a slight cross to them. But, you know, they keep to themselves. They're quiet. They don't seem to bother anybody. But they, other than trying to keep their crimes from being noticed by the authorities, except, you know, were unavoidable, they didn't leave many clues because they plotted it out in advance. They were cold and calculated murderers, almost all of them. I mean, Elizabeth Bathory, who was royalty in the 15th century, she had her own thing going, and it wasn't sanctioned by the government. She became obsessed with the notion that she was getting older, and she was getting wrinkles and a little waddle probably in her neck. And she would have her court go into villages and find the most beautiful young virgins that she could. And when they would come and meet her, she'd wine them and dine them and treat them like they were special. And then they'd take them down into the dungeon, and then they'd kill them, drain their blood into a big vat, and she would bathe in it. And, you know, they called her Countess Dracula after a while. And there's a great film with Christopher Lee and a bit part in it. And I think Barbara Steele's in it. It's from the 60s. It's Countess of Blood or Lady Dracula or something. It's a really good movie for that era. It was like one of the knockoffs of Hammer movies from Europe. But these guys are, you know, I was talking to you guys earlier about Charlie Chaplin. He did a movie called Monsieur Verdoux, in which he played a serial killer, and he would elderly ladies whose husbands had died or who had never been married, convince them to marry him, and then, not long after the I do's, he would tie them to boulders and dump them into the Danube River. And he didn't inherit their fortunes. And when he was ultimately caught, and in the film, it's hilarious because it's a dark comedy. When he was finally caught, they found his correspondence list of prospective victims. And they don't know how many in total that he killed. And some of them he raped, but he had a correspondence list of 50 prospects that he planned to go one after the other until he got their fortunes. So you could see the difference between some of our serial killers who are just kind of nutty and torture animals when they're kids. And then, Ted Bundy's probably the closest to the European model. Because Jeffrey Dahmer he was kind of off his nut. He was a little bit crazy. Well, not a little bit. He was very much crazy. But Ted Bundy, he plotted it out. Or sometimes he would, act on impulse. Mm-hmm. But most of the European serial killers were not as impulsive as American serial killers tend to be. Yeah. So it's a fascinating study to dig in and find out how far back this goes. I mean, like we said at the start, hundreds of years of trial and error to see who could cause. What baffles me is the folks who decide to open inns, and they would kill people in their inn, usually a husband and wife team. And we were talking about The Hills Have Eyes being based on a story from hundreds of years ago, where this family of cannibals capture people as they went from town to town and cook them and eat them. And it became stuff of legend. And then Wes Craven updated it. So there's some fact in most of these horror stories to some degree or another.
Yeah.
We need to pop in our last commercial break, everybody. Do you feel lost in life? Do you seem to be stuck in emotions that are not yours? Is your home not the sanctuary it should be? Contact Spirit Mechanics, where they take a team approach to your metaphysical and spiritual problems. Spirit Mechanics specializes in aura cleansing, stone attunement, attachment removal, and house cleansings. Spirit Mechanics tailors their approach to your individual spiritual path and needs. Find them every month at Lexington, Kentucky's Mystical Fair, mysticalfairlex.com, or on Facebook by searching Spirit Mechanics, that's MECHANIX. Spirit Mechanics, for your spiritual health and well-being.
Coyote Chris Sutton.
Shamanism.
Spiritual advisement.
Paranormal investigations.
Inspirational presentations.
Bringing light to the darkest places for over 20 years. Go to coyotechris.com to learn more.
Genteel version.
And welcome back, everybody, to Scarefest Radio. We're finishing up now. We've got a few more minutes to talk about European serial killers. The one thing I'm looking... Okay, after listening to you, and Bud, and going through my little list here, the one thing that stands out in my mind, and you've kind of alluded to it, but it seems like where American serial killers, a lot of them, not by no means all of them, but we've actually got several that just killed for the fun of it, just to kill.
Yeah.
But Europeans, most of the ones I'm seeing in this list, they had a plan. Whether it was to eternal youth, the one you talked about a minute ago, stole all their money, or for food, which is just. But anyway, Is that just me not paying attention, or is that?
No, I think you're right. There's a practicality to their approach, and it's plotted out in advance, and they've worked out a plan. And it's a slow boil rather than setting the world on fire straight out of the gate. Most of them just were quiet and in the background. Even Sweeney Todd is believed to be somewhat based on truth. The story of Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. I've investigated that, and most people say, "Oh, it's a myth." There are some that swear that there's some truth to it. Of course, they've romanticized it.
I guess that observation then begs the question: do you think that is that coincidence, or is that a cultural thing? Are Europeans more practical than us?
I really don't have an answer, because all I can think of is their governments demand that they behave in a certain way, and they clearly want to break the pattern. It's almost as if their governmental systems in toto want them to conform, and so they're striking back in some way. It's what it seems like. I mean, no one's ever really done a study like that I'm aware of. I may be wrong, but I don't think anybody's done a study of it to try to say, why is there this difference? I mean, sure, there's the occasional thrill kill over there, but they're outnumbered by the ones that have plotted it out and are doing it to survive, in a sense, to gain money, to gain youth,
power,
to gain power and position. And, I mean, even the Nazi woman that wanted to have, pieces of furniture covered with the flesh of her victims. And Geen read about that. And he would get these imported magazines. And he even obtained illegally some shrunken heads. So he had shrunken heads. So that's why he decided, I'm going to see if I can get some of these flesh-covered lampshades, and ended up making some.
Yeah. Yes, you have to start with a model and then go from there.
Yeah.
Gives you the ideas. I was thinking, you were talking earlier about we were so worried about numbers and all these victims, and I just thought, wait for you to make money, bud. Serial killer trading cards. Picture on the front and the back statistics for every year that they were active. And I mean, the chat room just went wild over the thing about all the numbers of victims. Yeah, this is great stuff. And dude, I mean, there you go. I'm gonna hand that to you. And people would eat that up. It'd go great. You'd sell a bunch of them at Scarefest.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend that was a bartender at a Chi-Chi's when they were open back in Wilmington, North Carolina, and she gave me an Ed Gein trading card, and I've still got it somewhere.
Somebody did it already?
They didn't have the body counts, but I've got 2 books that's loaded with serial killers, and it's the photocopies of the cards that they made. This was in the late 80s, early 90s.
If there's one thing I know, Chris, there is nothing new under the sun. There has not been an original thought in the last 200 years. I don't care what anybody says.
I've heard somebody say, if you can think of it, it's on the internet.
There you go. Everybody, this has been Scarefest Radio. We're going to go ahead and call it a night. That's been our European serial killer discussion. And so that little what are we going to call it? The serial killer erection that the seminar staff has. This is like a preview of the Scarefest. Just more of that kind of stuff.
Demented, I swear. You are so bad tonight. You are bad.
Well, when I had a bull this week that had a groin pull. What kind of bull gets a groin pull? Everybody, this has been Scarefest Radio. Thanks for watching.